We are just one day away from Utah's first game against a Big 12 opponent in 2024. It's a non-conference game, but it doesn't mean it's not an opportunity for Utah to make a big statement against a Big 12 foe. So who's in for a big day? Cam Rising, Brant Kuithe, Connor O'Toole, Teo Johnson. We're going to tell you who on today's Locked On Utes.
You are Locked On Utes, your daily podcast on the Utah Utes. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, everyone, and thank you for making Locked On Utes your first listen every single day. We are part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where we cover your team every day. And if this is your first listen, make sure you like and subscribe. If you're in the market for a second listen, Locked On College Football has you covered as we gear up for week 2 of the CFB season. Make sure you guys like and subscribe. Love interacting with all of you in the comment section. Also, want to take a moment to thank the sponsor of today's episode of Locked On Utes, Gametime. Today's episode is brought to you by Gametime. You can download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege, all caps, no spaces, for $20 off your first purchase. My name is JT Wistrcill, former intern inside the University of Utah Athletic Department, and today it's time to drop some predictions for who on this Utah Utes roster is going to ball out against the Baylor Bears this Saturday. And as Utah begins a new era in the Big 12, it'll be their first time taking on a Big 12 team since entering the conference officially. I'm excited to bring on a first-time guest on the show now, as Matt Patton of Utah Rivals excited to join me. You guys might know Matt for his great breakdown, statistical-wise, that he does on social media, keeps us covered on everything. And Matt, that's what I'm excited to talk with you about here, is who is in for a big game against Utah. And let's start with Bad Moon Rising, right? It was so great to have him back last weekend, and you did a great job highlighting in your the Twitter breakdown that you did, that maybe the best part of this Baylor team might be the secondary. But I still think Cam Rising in this passing attack, there's a reason this Utah team is a top 12 team. They're 11, should be 10 in my opinion. Ranted about that earlier this week. But I think Cam's going to have a big game. I think that when you look at the amount of weapons that Utah has, Baylor's pass rush has improved, and I do think they might get home a couple times in this game. But I think overall, Utah's going to come in with another strong game plan. They're the better team, and that includes on the outside to me still. I think Cam's going to go over 300 yards and have 3 passing touchdowns in this one.
I like that. I like that a lot. You're absolutely right. There are so many weapons. I look at Stanley, and you have to remember that was against an FCS team, and that means that they didn't even open the playbook. They just used a couple same routes, using those wheel routes. So I think that Rising, he's got Stanley, he's got Kuithe. If they try to hone in on those guys, we haven't even seen what some of the receivers can do. I agree. I think a game over 300 yards makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, you could definitely just go over 200 in this one. It could be a lower scoring one, but I do think that this passing attack, and I think Utah's run game is going to be solid. I just think the passing attack is going to end up being the strength of this team. You need to feed a guy like Brant Kuithe. You need to feed Dorian Singer. I do think Brant will lead this team in receiving yards this game again. I think he's going to go over 80 yards, but I also think Dorian Singer will. And Matt, you mentioned it. We haven't seen everything from this offense. And what does that also mean? We haven't seen everyone contribute. I think Landon King is going to make a couple grabs this game. We didn't notice Landon in the game, but he was on the field early and often. And we saw in training camp, he was even beating guys like Smith Snowden in coverage. So he has to see the field more, right? And I know Caleb Lohner got a lot of shine. I am very curious to see with Caleb Lohner just how he continues. Is he used every game in critical spots, since he is just so new playing football? He looked good in week 1, but also at a drop that against an opponent that is a legit one like Baylor, you can't afford to make those mistakes. So was impressed with Lohner overall for his first time really doing this in live action, but curious to see that. But the number one guy I just got to believe we're going to see more of in this game is Damian Alford. Yes, Money Parks is going to be your main guy on the outside. Micah Pittman will get some involvement too. Damian Alford did play last week. He was credited with participation. We saw him running around out there a few times. I think in this game, he's going to make a big play. I think it's going to be over 15 yards, and we're going to hear that big old roar in Rice-Eccles Stadium that we missed for so long on a Saturday afternoon.
Yeah, I think Singer and Alford, Whittingham specifically pointed out Singer, but I think that it's almost intentional that they haven't been using Alford yet. He's got that height, almost as tall, isn't he? 6'7". So I think
Six, 7, like
okay.
with cleats, maybe 6'7", depending on
Yeah.
how, everyone likes to give a little bit of that roster height bump, right?
Yeah, I mean, and so I kind of feel like with Caleb Lohner, for example, they were using him just to see what he could do, and it's a great a spot to do that against Southern Utah.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think you'd see Alford get more of those types of passes in a big game when you play against Baylor.
I agree. I think Alford. I'm very curious. Carson Ryan as well. Another one. Dallin Bentley didn't get a chance to make a grab last game, but he was on the field as well frequently. So many weapons. I haven't mentioned Money Parks' name. He's always a guy that's capable of making a big play too.
Absolutely.
So many guys that have a chance to contribute for this Utah offense. And I do think the running game is going to have a solid outing as well. I do think you're going to see Utah. I just look, I know Baylor did some nice things against Charleston. I know that they're improved from last year. They're not going to go 3-9 this year. I don't know if they'll reach bowl eligibility. I like Dave Aranda. I hope he keeps his job. But also just the fact of only one team has won in Rice-Eccles Stadium since 2019. That was Bo Nix and the Oregon Ducks. And not the Bo Nix that we saw, and not the or not, excuse me, not the Bo, but not the Oregon team we saw on Saturday that nearly lost to Idaho, but the one last year that was a top 10 team. And this Baylor team's not that. They have Daquan Finn. They're still breaking him in. I want to talk about everything with Finn and some of that stuff in a moment, but this defense finished outside the top 100 last year. So even with the secondary still having some nice spots, the linebacking core, some solid players. I think the defensive line is improved. Utah is just clearly the better team. If they execute and are at their best, they should win the line of scrimmage to me. So you're going to see over 150 yards rushing. Mekhi Bernard is the leading back. I thought Jalen Glover played pretty well last week too. So he's another one that I expect to see get more roles. And Matt, you highlighted Dejon Stanley so early. Dejon will be involved a lot still to me, but I'm also so excited for how Andy Ludwig can now use Dejon as a decoy, because anytime he's on the field, this defense will be keying in on him. So even the wheel routes, which you're not used to having a defense like have their ears perk up for a wheel route, but if we're even slightly misaligned with the speed that Stanley has, it just can absolutely devastate you. So the running game is another area where I do expect Utah to have some success, because this is not the Baylor team that won the Big 12 in the trenches a couple of years ago.
Yeah. No, and that's something I noticed. And when you talked about what Ute player would have a big day, my first thought went right to the running back room, because Baylor had the worst rush defense in the Big 12 last season. That's why they had a defense that was outside the top 100, and that's just not a strong defensive line. And if you look at it, they lost their best player on defensive end. I can't think of the name right now, but their defensive end, their defensive tackle, and they really didn't get many great players to come in through the transfer portal. So Utah should be able to attack that defensive line all game long. It's just, who will it be? And that's still hard to know. And the good thing is Baylor won't know either. Will it be Mike Mitchell? Will it be Dejon Stanley? Will it be Jalen Glover? And of course, Micah Bernard's going to be there, but how much? So, and maybe it's all of them.
Yeah. My biggest hope is just for Mike Mitchell that he holds on to the ball, because we saw how quickly last year, if you fumble, Kyle Whittingham will not play you. I saw this Utah team with they put Nate Johnson in against Oregon State, and they are like, we are not going to run Nate Johnson because he fumbles. And they didn't say that, obviously, but like that is what they were saying based on their play call, because his best attribute is running the ball, and they were only letting him drop back because they were worried he was going to fumble. So it's things like that where it's just, I hope that he can hold on to the ball, because we are all so fired up about his potential. And as I mentioned too, I feel like there's a chance Cam could get sacked in this game, because even though his Baylor defensive line is not, it's one of the weaker parts of this team, it's a step up from Southern Utah. And we saw Cam get pressured by that Southern Utah front. So I think it's a nice test for the Utah offensive line. I just love how these 3 games are such a great ramp up for all of Utah's roster, I feel like, in terms of, hey, you played an FCS team, clearly better then you're going to play a Power 5 team. And even though Baylor I don't expect them to become a top 25 team at any point in the year, very well could end up being one of the 50 best teams in the country. That remains to be seen. But either way, a Power 5 team, but not a juggernaut of a Power 5 team. And then even Utah State, right, which is a team, a group of 5 team that has done some nice things, maybe the revenge game for Bryson Barnes angle. But I just feel like this schedule sets this Utah team so well to get back and get acclimated. I've pushed back all week long on Cam Rising didn't impress me and all the things of that nature. But I will say too, I mean, he wasn't perfect. The throw to Money Parks, it was a little behind him. He still brought it in. So that's where I feel like people are nitpicking, and the throw to, Micah Pittman over the middle of the field, missed him there a little bit too. So Cam wasn't perfect. I still think he was really good. And some of the discourse about that is out of control, but that's why I'm loving these games as an opportunity for him to get more experience, get more comfortable before that big test in Stillwater.
Yeah, and you talk about ramp up. That's something that I really like that I saw just against SUU. The first half, there was some things that weren't quite, going the way you'd like to see, especially on the offensive line. And even on the defense, they weren't really getting the penetration you'd want to see and the pressure on the quarterback. But by the second half, that completely changed. And things seemed to be a lot better in sync. And that was even once you started to lose some starters, right? So
Yeah.
I think we'll see that again here against Baylor, where they just now take that next step. And usually you see so much progress from that first game to the second game. And with a team with so much talent like Utah has, it's going to look really good against Baylor.
It is going to look really good. And I also think the defense is going to look really good. So we got to preview which individuals on Utah's defense are going to have a massive outing inside Rice-Eccles Stadium in one moment. But first, I want to talk with you all about the sponsor of our episode of Locked On Utes today, our friends at LinkedIn Talent Solutions. When you're hiring for your small business, you want to find quality professionals that are right for the role. That's why you have to check out LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs is the tools to help you find those right professionals for your team faster and for free. LinkedIn isn't just another job board. LinkedIn helps you hire professionals you can't find anywhere else, even those who aren't actively searching for a new job, but might be open to the perfect role. In a given month, over 70% of LinkedIn users don't visit other leading job sites. So if you're not looking on LinkedIn, you're looking in the wrong place. On LinkedIn, 86% of small businesses get a qualified candidate within 24 hours. You can hire professionals like a professional with LinkedIn. LinkedIn knows that small businesses are wearing so many hats that they might not have the time or resources to hire. That's why LinkedIn is constantly finding ways to make the hiring process simpler. And it's also one of the reasons that LinkedIn is used by over 2.5 million small businesses. You can post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedoncollege. That's linkedin.com/lockedoncollege. Locked On College is all caps, no spaces. To post your job for free, terms and conditions do apply. All right, Matt, still with me here as we'll switch to the defensive side of the ball for this Utah team, and really starts with Daquan Finn, Baylor's quarterback. I am much more scared of his legs than I am his arm. You did a great job noting in your Twitter, in the post you made, he's had 27 interceptions, Matt, over the last few years, or is it 25?
Let's see, 25. Yep, 25.
Okay, 27 after Saturday. So 27 interceptions after Saturday, because I do think he's going to turn it over a few times. He turned it over twice against Tarleton, and neither one was a good pick. It wasn't like at the end of the year, Shador Sanders will have an interception because a ball bounced off a guy's ankle into the air. Those were not the interceptions Daquan Finn had. One of them, he just threw it up deep, and the guy was not open. The other, he was forced out to his right, and he was scrambling, and he tried to throw it, and he didn't see the guy who was right in front of him, his intended target. So I think Finn has some talent. I think there's a chance that he could make some plays with his legs. I actually think he's going to be this team's leading rusher. I'm not a fan. This Baylor team is better defensively than they are offensively. I'm not a fan of their running backs. I'm not a major fan of their offensive line. And I think Finn is their best rusher. But that's why if I'm Utah, biggest thing is contain him, make sure he doesn't get outside the pocket, and force him to try to make plays downfield. Now, Baylor's receivers will have a chance and probably win some of those one-on-one situations. No Kenan Johnson, as well as this is a group last year that won some of those situations against Utah. We remember Miles' battle at the end of the game. It nearly spiraled out of control. That type of a play can happen in this one. But I don't see this Baylor team being able to move the ball consistently because Utah is going to make them one-dimensional, and I don't think Daquan Finn is going to function well being one-dimensional.
No, not at all. And, I got to give Daquan Finn some credit. I mean, when he was out there in the transfer portal, he was a big target for a lot of schools. And that's because he is such a good dual threat quarterback. Mm-hmm. And he's played a lot of games. And that's a part of why he's so high on the interception list. I think he's number 14 right now of interceptions thrown of active quarterbacks. So he's definitely thrown a few. And it's because he slings that ball all over the field. And he's a little reckless with it. In fact, there was a couple other interceptions that were dropped. I mean, they were right in the hands of the Tarleton State players. So it could have been even worse for him in this last game. But that also means he'll get a couple. He'll land a couple big throws.
Yep.
And so that'll happen too. But I completely agree. It looks like their top rusher, Dominic Richardson's going to be out for the game. And like you said, Pendergrass, he's just a big runner, likes to just go north and south. And then they got Reese, and he's a little bit more like your a little bit like Jalen Glover crossed with Mekhi Bernard. It's kind of your scat back. And so Utah shouldn't have any problem with either of those guys. They're both just average, to be kind. And so, yeah, you shut those guys down. They did have a little trouble with QB contain against SUU. And so I agree, too, that Finn will probably have 70, 80 yards rushing in this game.
Yeah, I feel like that's how he'll get loose, but we also know this Utah team. You know what, Matt? He's going to have that, but then the weird thing in college where they count the sacks as rushing yards, I feel like, which I can't stand, by the way. I just think there's got to be a statistical way for us to realize, like, hey, this guy is like decides to scramble. Now he's past the line of scrimmage. Oh, rushing yards. Oh, he got tackled behind the line of scrimmage. But yeah, it was clearly a pass play. Like, I don't think we should give him -8 yards for that. That's a separate rant for another day, though. But yeah, I think that Finn will have a chance to make some plays. The receivers will make some plays. Utah's not shutting out Baylor. Baylor's going to do some things, and I agree with what you said too. Let's talk about Daquan Finn. I think he's a solid quarterback in the Big 12. I think he will end, or I guess the Big 12 has some pretty good quarterbacks. But overall, I think he's a pretty good college quarterback for even the Power 4 level. But he's going in Rice-Eccles Stadium. And I have seen Jaden Daniels, and I know it was before Jaden Daniels became Heisman Jaden Daniels. I've seen how bad Jaden Daniels looked in Utah. I've seen so many offenses come in here. I mean, look at Florida last year. I know Florida's not great. If there was a Gator fan for some reason listening, they would be screaming about how Billy Napier and Graham Mertz and all this and all that. But it's just what Utah does. They make these guys play even worse. We see the how many dang false start and just penalties last week. And I know that's week 1 Southern Utah, but we see this all the time with opponents. So that's why we can actually factor it in. Teams get fatigued because of the altitude. Even games that are closer than normal at halftime, those teams wear out by the time the second half. Rice-Eccles Stadium, there's been a lot of comments about, like, the volume and everything of that nature. Saturday, Power 5 game, this place will be rocket. I have no doubt about that. And that's where you're going to see this Baylor team get tripped up a little bit. And I can't wait to just see the atmosphere that awaits the Baylor Bears.
Yeah, it's going to be insane. It always is. Utah's such a different team at Rice-Eccles Stadium. Always.
Yeah, they're spectacular there. So as for the individuals, I think they're going to play well. Their left tackle is slow-footed. And I think Connor O'Toole is ready to take advantage of that. We're talking about a former tight end converted to a defensive end that the coaching staff been raving about for 2 years. I think this is a 2-sack performance by Connor O'Toole. Also think there will be another one where Utah does a good job forcing Finn to step up in the pocket, and that's where Mr. Keanu Tanuvasa will be waiting to engulf him. So 3 sacks, I'm going there. And I am going with 2 picks. You throw 2 picks against Tarleton, I'm sorry, you're throwing 2 picks inside Rice-Eccles Stadium as well. One of those, which will go to Karene Reed, who will do a good job disguising where he's at and pop up when Finn least expects it. Another one, I'm going to go with Gilman. I think Gilman gets one on the back end for this Utah squad. Matt, for you, is there any Utah Ute in particular? Maybe it's a Teo Johnson, who we might see more at nickel this week. It remains to be seen how Utah will exactly make that shakeup, because Kyle Whittingham loves to be coy with the media, of course. But which Utah Utes defensively do you think are in for a big outing?
You keep taking exactly what's in my mind. Teo Johnson, it's going to be his breakout party. I actually thought Teo was going to get 2 because I think the way watching Finn in these last couple games that I've seen him, he loves to throw that ball deep, and he's going to go for some home runs, and Johnson's going to be right there ready to take them. So I think Johnson, and then I was thinking on the defensive side, I think Connor O'Toole is going to do great, but this is going to be a Lander Barton breakout party. I think that this is the kind of game where I see him. I see a lot of blitzes and having him come off the edge. I wouldn't even be surprised to see a couple safety blitzes getting some sacks. And I think it's going to be a 4-sack game.
I would love to see that as well. And I think Utah's absolutely got a chance to do that. Finn is elusive, but you can only break so many tackles, especially if they are the safeties, to your point. Like, that's where their quickness compared to, no offense, but Keanu Tanuvasa trying to tackle Daquan Finn in space, I feel a lot better if that is Lander Barton Teo Johnson, whatever safeties Utah decides to send on a blitz to. I would love to see, and this is always the balance, right? Because Utah has Sione Fotu. They have other good linebackers too. I'd love to see more Jonathan Hall in this game. I just think he's fantastic. I like the transitional linebacker for him because of how good he played in the box against Northwestern. I like the flashes we saw against Southern Utah. He's another defender I would love to see in this one. And I can't wait to see this Utah team get a chance to really tee off on a Big 12 opponent for the first time this year, because all the Big 12 fans have been frustrated that Utah's been picked to be the preseason favorite. They're like, why this? And all the frustrations in that. And I think Utah's got a real chance here, Matt, to make a statement. And that's exactly what I think Utah's going to do too. I think they're covering that 15-point spread, whatever it is by the time this episode ends up dropping or the time you're listening to it. I think it's going to be 34-17 Utah. Where's your score prediction landing?
I'm going 38-17. So close. These guys are just going to be so pumped for the game. They've been waiting so long. And yeah, they got to play SUU, but these guys are ready to play a real team. They're ready to play a Big 12 team, and they're going to be ready to go. And so are the fans.
They are. And it's going to be exciting to see this team really gear up for Big 12 action. Speaking of Big 12 action, we got to talk about the significance of this. It's been a long time since Utah was announced in the Big 12, over a year now. But the fact that we are about to see Utah and one of their conference opponents for years to come, Baylor, take the field, I believe is significant. So I want to talk about what exactly this new era of Utah in the Big 12 will look like when we're finally witnessing it with our eyes in one moment. But first, want to talk with you all about one of the sponsors of today's episode of Locked On Utes, our great friends at Gametime. Gametime has a new feature called Game Picks that makes getting tickets for your favorite live events even easier. Game Picks filters out all the fluff to show you incredible deals on great seats so you don't have to waste time searching through thousands of tickets. There are so many fantastic deals you can use. How about the seat view as well? So you just know what kind of a deal that you're getting. There's a low price guarantee, event cancellation protection, job loss protection. You can use the app feature listed in your custom and customize your spot and then supplement as inspiration that allows you to build your perfect selection, whether it's concerts, of course, football games, preferably Utah football, Jazz games, NHL games now. Gametime is the place for you. Gametime curation makes it even easier to save money on sports, concert, comedy, and theater events near you. You can take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege, capital L of locked, over on, C for college, and those three letters capitalized, no spaces in the rest of the word. Locked On College for $20 off your first purchase. Terms do apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONCOLLEGE for $20 off. Download Gametime today. What time is it? Gametime. All right, Matt, to close this one out, let's just talk about Utah in the Big 12 and how crazy it is. And I know we've done endless hours of off-season content on this show about Utah in the Big 12 this, Utah in the Big 12 that. But such a popular saying is, I want to, like, talk is cheap, right? Like, let's see it to believe it, all the things of that nature. And it is just crazy. We're entering this era. And once again, I know that Utah Baylor's a non-conference game, but this is one of the teams that Utah, after last year's wild game, like, that's the kind of chapter in a rivalry you don't forget. So that's the one thing I would enjoy if this game was close is Utah. I want them to build these new Big 12 rivalries. I think Baylor, when they're rolling, has a great chance to be one of those rivalries. I actually like Dave Aranda. I hope that he figures out a way to keep this job because I think he is the right guy for this Baylor program. Sometimes you just have down years that are more down than other programs could have. But I am really excited for this next chapter for Utah too. So much has been made about the transition, but finally getting to see these new rivalries. This is the first time we're going to have it shaped out with Utah going and facing a Big 12 team with that Big 12 logo on Rice-Eccles Stadium. And now that it's finally here, I'm excited to see how all these new stories against Utah's new rivals get written.
Yeah, you want to see how Utah stacks up against new teams. We've seen them play plenty of games against all the Pac-12 teams. How can they do against the Big 12? I've seen a lot of guys on Twitter saying, hey, Utah's not going to do well against the Big 12. This is a different breed. These are the Hosses at the line, the big time running back schools. And I just think, well, okay, you don't know Utah because that's exactly what Utah's built on. But honestly, we don't know. And so this is a huge deal. We get to see how they stack up against these these teams that are pretty good. This is a pretty well-balanced conference.
There's some solid teams. We mentioned it. Baylor's down this year. I don't expect them to stay down for long. I think they'll bounce back. I think a number of these teams right now, like Iowa State really disappointed me the first week, but I think by the time that game rolls around, that could be like a pesky team that's ranked inside the top 20 to 25, as well as just missing out on the ranking. So number of these teams that it's going to be fun to watch them, how the clash and everything ends up rolling in. And I'm just happy that it's here because, like you said, Matt, we've been talking about it for so long. And before we do Big 12 Utah, I do just want to get this one rant out of the way, which we've done before. Isn't it always so funny when people say, like, how can Utah? Well, number one, like you said, the physicality for Utah, right, is literally how they won. And if people like the Pac-12 was down when Utah was winning. If Oregon and USC had won, first of all, especially USC the second time around, USC was like fourth. They were going to the playoff if they avenged their only loss on the season. And Utah did. I always used to say it's hard to beat a good team twice. And then Utah did that 2 years in a row, and they beat Oregon twice and USC twice. So I always think that's funny when people do that to discredit Utah. Also, the Pac-12 champion last year literally beat the Big 12 champion in the college football playoff. So it's always funny how the narrative gets changed and shifted to support one team and try to tear down another. But there is no argument with how the results play out on the field. And that is what we get to see Utah do against their new rival. And speaking of rivals, Matt, if people want more Utah football content, where should they head over to?
Yep, rivals.com. Yep, the Ute Nation on rivals.com. You can catch all sorts of articles there. I do the previews every week, so come check out the previews. I go in depth, get the stats in there, give you everything you need to know about the Utes' next opponent. So definitely go check it out.
One of the best follows for you guys on Utah Twitter. It's at Patton, Patton _Matt. Matt, excited to see how our predictions and this game plays out. Really appreciate you coming on with me.
Really, really appreciate you having me on.
That's going to do it for today's edition of Locked On Utes. Big 12 football is here. Enjoy Utah versus Baylor. I will be back after the game, breaking it down and getting us all set for what is to come, which is a exciting season of Utah football continuing to roll on. Big thanks to Matt for joining me again. That's going to do it for today's edition of Locked On Utes. We'll be back with you next week. Enjoy Utah versus Baylor.